Hi, everyone. Welcome to our newest webinar on effective workplace communication. We're so excited to be bringing this information to you, and hopefully you'll find something useful here. So let's start thinking about how do we communicate at work? We communicate in lots of different ways, don't we? So we communicate verbally with the words that we use, talking to people, just basic, talking and using words. We communicate a lot with our body language and tone as well. So the way we're sitting, the way we're speaking, the way we're choosing to use our voice when we're talking, and the way we're acting. It's a big difference if I'm like this versus, open and talking like this. It gives you a very different perspective on what I'm saying. And then we communicate in writing as well. Any type of writing, could be an email, a text, could be signage, could be, handwritten, could be typed, could be on a screen, could be on a page. So verbal communication, basically, to break it down a little more, is talking to people using words, the words we use, as well as the tone we use to deliver them. Face-to-face verbal communication also includes our body language, the things we do with our body, our hands, our facial expressions, and so on. And verbal communication is the richest type of communication because it has all those elements to it. Body language and tone are part of verbal communication, and they are very important. This is a very famous picture that was taken a few years ago of a number of world leaders and former US President Trump. And the body language in this picture is undeniable. There's no question in anyone's mind what everybody thinks of each other in this picture. And so no one's even using any words at all, but we know very well what everyone's thinking and feeling by the way that they're holding their bodies. So body language and tone also include eye contact, looking around at distractions that may be in the room or, through a window or something like that, including your listening skills, how well you're paying attention and showing, all the things you can do physically to show that you're listening to someone. And body language and tone do have more richness to the communication than just written communication by itself. Now, written communication is any type of words in print, whether they're on a page or on a screen. There's no tone, there's no body language. So this is therefore the least rich type of communication. Some of the ways we communicate in writing are emails, memos, employee manuals, faxes, instant messages, letters, good old-fashioned letters, text messages, all types of things like that. If you're using one of the instant messaging platforms in your workplace, that all counts as written communication. And the important thing we have to remember is there is no tone, there is no body language. So it's difficult to know sometimes what the tone of voice is of the person who's speaking. So imagine this scenario. You say to somebody, "How you doing?" And they walk in and say, "I'm fine." They could say that in a number of different ways. It's the exact same two words, but you could take it a lot of different ways. So if the person comes in and says, "Oh, I'm fine. How are you doing?" That's one way. They could also come in and say the exact same words. "Yeah, fine, fine. How are you?" Gives you a very different impression each way. And there's probably 100 other ways you could do the same example. But just to illustrate how important our body language and our tone are when we're responding to questions or talking to people at work. So how effective are the different types of communication? 7% of communication is the words we choose, just plain old words. 38% is related to our tone of voice. 55% is related to body language. So the majority of what you're saying, of what people understand of what you're saying, comes from your body language. And so that means 93% of communication is not even verbal. It's not even anything to do with the words. 93% of what somebody hears from you is through your tone and your body language. So this means written communication, when we are communicating in writing at work, only conveys 7% of what we're trying to say. So that's why it's really important to think about, how am I communicating and what do I need to make sure I do so that my message comes across clearly? So it's a little bit of a spectrum. We just did this as a visual for the different types of communication. So in face-to-face, verbal or virtual, over Zoom or whatever you're using, we have tone, body language, we have the actual words, and we have timing. So there's a lot of factors working together to convey your message. Over the phone, when we communicate verbally, we have timing, we have tone, and we have words, but we don't have the facial expression or the body language to go with it. And then finally, if we're communicating in a nonverbal way or a written manner, all we have is the words. So when we are job searching, it's really important to think about how we're communicating. So when we're doing an application, it's important to always use professional language. If you're not sure about your language in your application or your cover letter, remember you can always send it in to us. We'll be happy to have a look. Spelling and grammar must be perfect. If you make a spelling mistake in your job application, there's a chance the employer may just say, I'm not looking at that application. It has a very simple spelling mistake in it. And if the person wasn't careful enough for that, they're not careful enough to work here. That might sound harsh, but unfortunately, that's how it is out there. So it's really important to check all your spelling, check your grammar, and check your personal information each and every time you send out your resume. It's very easy to slip, especially in Microsoft Word, and end up with that cursor in the wrong place and accidentally mess up your email address or your phone number. So just take a second to double check it before you send it off. And then when you're job searching as well, you want to always, if you're sending an email with your job application, you want to make sure to put something in the body of that email. Don't just attach your resume and send it. That's a very cold and impersonal way. And plus, you're missing out on a golden opportunity to say something else to the employer. So just a very short email introducing yourself and that you're applying for the job is really all you need to do. But you do need to put something else in the body of the email. So also check the job description. Many companies, especially larger companies, really have rules and regulations about how they want their job descriptions submitted. So they may want the format, the file format, maybe they want a PDF, maybe they want a Word document, whatever it may be. Maybe they want you to upload your resume somewhere. Maybe they want you to email it to somebody specific. They may ask for your file to be named in a certain way. And you don't want to miss those details because your application will simply get overlooked if you do. Are you taking over here, Tulay?
Yeah, I am actually. Okay, thanks, Laurie. So I'll just continue with communication when job searching. But one very important thing that is commonly missed is the amount of time that you take to respond. It's very vital to respond as soon as possible. And usually we prefer that you respond within 24 hours. This is very simple because it also shows that, you're enthusiastic and you've been really checking to see that, if you're getting a response for this position. And one common mistake that's made is the types of questions that are asked when the employer reaches out for an initial interview. It's okay to ask about, where the location of the interview is, or maybe what type of interview it will be. However, anything else, you just want to make sure you're saving it for the interview. Another really important thing is even if you're not interested in the job, something happens from when you apply to the job to when you get your response, you should still be responding because you never know in the future if you apply to that company, they might remember, we reached out to this person, there was no response. You never want to burn a bridge for future opportunities. And then when you're job searching, how we answer the phone is very important. One key thing is always have your phone nearby. If not, have a proper voicemail set. But when you pick up the phone, it's a very common question for an employer to say, hello, may I speak with so-and-so? How are you today? And a lot of the times the answers are good, okay, fine. But you should really make sure that, your tone is coming off right. So a good way to answer is, I'm great, thanks. How are you doing? I'm doing well. I'm better now that I've heard from you. This really shows your enthusiasm and motivation for the job. So just be ready to answer those questions, but also follow up with the question of how are you doing? Check your messages. So To effectively job search and communicate, you need to have a working phone, like I mentioned before. Make sure your voicemail is professional. So sometimes we hear a lot of jokes on the emails where the person picks up, they're like, hello? Hello? Just kidding, leave a message. So things like that, when you're job searching, it's probably good for you to change it back to, hi, you've reached the voicemail of Tulay. I'm not able to take your call right now. Anything of that sort that's just pretty commonly used, we should revert back to that, especially during a job search. So you should have a bit professional voicemail greeting, and then check emails and voicemails at least twice a day, and then respond as soon as you get a voicemail or an email. Even from The Office, Laurie, what was this character's name?
Oh, I forget his name, but he was the boss on Office Space.
I forgot his name as well.
Yeah, yeah.
He agrees with us. And then while you're at work, so once you get the position, you're in the job, how to communicate verbally. Now, I wanted to add to this, and remind me if I forget, Laurie, about how to communicate verbally with a mask, but I'll go through this first. So think before you speak. Make sure you're using an appropriate tone. So if you're in a indoor office setting, you don't really need to be as loud as you would be on a construction site if you're working, and using your volume accordingly. Now, this might seem simple, but it is sometimes missed. So, just being aware of your surroundings, it's very important.
You're looking at me when you're saying that, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
I know I have one of those voices that carries. So I do have to be aware of it at times.
No, you're fine. I really do mean that. Being clear and concise. So just making sure that, the person is able to understand you. So it could, and being aware of yourself. So if, you have an Irish or a Scottish accent, you have to make sure that you're speaking clearly and concisely, and maybe even slowing it down a little bit for the person to understand you. And then just nonverbal cues. We mentioned majority of communication is done through nonverbal cues. So body language is one of them. The setting that you're in, we spoke about a little bit. And then you're knowing your audience too. So the person that you're speaking with, do they have the background story already? Are you starting from the middle of the conversation? And I'm guilty of this. I do this actually probably quite often. And I'm not looking at you, Laurie. I'm looking at my own reflection here. A lot of times we start from the middle of a conversation, but the person might not know the background story. So really, taking the time to know who your audience is, who you're talking to, and then timing as well. Like if I see Laurie running down the hall, I'm not going to stop her to try to talk about an issue that could maybe take half an hour of our time, making sure that I'm timing every conversation correctly. And a big part that a lot of people forget about with communication is listening. Listening is key, knowing when to, be on the receiving end, and making sure that you're understanding the person and making eye contact. So let's talk a little bit about masks, because they have hindered verbal communication. We've lost some of our expressions, and we find ourselves expressing ourselves more with our eyes and our eyebrows, and our tone of voice has to be more expressive now. I don't know if you want to add to that at all, but that's usually.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also, when you're wearing a mask, you have to think even more about speaking clearly. And sometimes you have to slow it down, speak maybe a little louder and a little more clearly than you normally would.
Mm-hmm. And eye contact is actually more important now, face-to-face verbal communication, well, if you have a mask on, because that's the one go-to thing that, you're aware of, is the person listening to me, or are they just, looking around? So it's very, very important now, especially. Okay, so communicating while working over the phone. So if you have to call in again, speaking clearly, and it's very important to smile, because that really does come across. It might seem silly, but your face will change your tone. So if you're smiling, you're going to come off more positive. You're most likely going to have the proper tone of voice as well. And then concentrating on the call, avoiding any distractions around you. The person cannot see you. However, they can notice if you're listening, or, you know, if you're not addressing every issue that they might be bringing up. And then again, listening and being patient is a part of any type of communication. And sometimes we might need more information if we're on a phone call. A lot of times we get a phone call to reception, and the person, you know, doesn't say their name or who they're calling or what it is that they need. They just assume, you know, the first name, and that's gonna be fine. No, you know, things such as, you know, hi, this is John Smith. I work in such and such department. How are you? Again, the how are you sets the tone. Giving some background information. Why are you calling? What you need help with, the reason that you're calling, what you want to accomplish, again. And with conclusion, just like any paragraph or essay, it could be a simple thank you for your time. I appreciate your time. Things like this is part of proper communication while working. Oh, I didn't talk about our Jerry Maguire here, the famous scene of show me the money. The expressions on their face, show me the money. See, he's smiling, he's so into it. He has, although he can't see him, his whole body's into what he's saying, and that really changes how you convey your feelings over the phone. So that's it's one of the scenes we wanted to show you there. Written communication while working. You know, I do have this gentleman's name, Kevin Malone,
Kevin.
from The Office. Me think why waste time, say lot word when few word do trick. Written communication, you do have to, it's nice to keep it clear and concise. However, you do need to give the proper information. So try reading your words out loud. Does it make sense? Maybe have someone next to you or your colleague read them and say exactly what you mean, because there's no body language, there's no tone to help you out with, you know, the person understanding what it is that you're saying. So any type of ambiguity doesn't work well in written communication, and you just have to keep that in mind. Staying on topic and keeping it simple is great. It also keeps the reader focused on it. Sometimes, you know, we do go into maybe too much detail when we're writing something, but you have to know where it's needed, where the detail is needed, and where you can keep it concise. And the tone, the only way I think you can set a tone for anything written is most likely with your opening sentence. So, you know, hi, Laurie, I hope you're doing well. I hope all is well. Things like that does set a tone. So an introduction is usually forgotten when we're writing an email, for example, and it might be easy to just get into the topic, but I feel like it's important in setting the tone for any type of written communication. And then again, most programs have spell check and all that, but just make sure you read over it, make sure your grammar is correct, and that you're checking to see if it makes sense. A common thing that we see is the use of emojis. So I just want to be clear that, you know, in a professional workplace, emojis really have no place unless, you know, you have a rapport with your colleague and you've built that relationship and you're not new. You've been working together for a while and you have some type of friendship, then your communication is going to be different. But, you know, if you're writing your supervisor an email, emojis should not be used, or short forms for that matter. And some of the short forms are LOL. I can think of a lot of other things that I'll refrain from, but most likely the employer is not going to be understanding. Even if they're commonly used, it shouldn't be used, again, for professional reasons. It doesn't sound professional. And then on the professional topic, avoid contractions. So instead of saying don't, just write out do not. It's something so simple to sound professional. So here's an example of an email. somebody who's late and they happen to blame the bus for being late. First of all, that's also a very common problem. Lots of issues here. So we have contractions, lots of emojis, lots going on here. Hopefully it won't happen again. Not sure. This means, I'm not sure. We'll figure it out, but let's agree, things like that. So this should be avoided. So communication in the workplace, really, it also involves feedback that you receive at work. And we thought this was an important topic because we get a lot of conversations around this. And we wanted to kind of shift the image or the perspective that everybody has on feedback. So feedback is, you can think of it as a part of your training, especially if you're new in the job. So it helps you learn your job. It helps you understand the employer's needs. So if your supervisor has certain things or certain ways that they need you to do something, it helps you understand, how can I be better at my job? How can I be a better team player? How can I do a better job? How can I stay on this job? So it should be viewed really as a positive thing. It usually is not a way for punishment or reprimand, or it's not intended to make you feel like you're not adequate enough or make you feel stupid or single you out. And the quicker you get used to feedback or receiving feedback, the better you're going to be in the workplace, because feedback is not just in the first 3 months of your employment. It's an ongoing thing. With my many years of employment, and I'm sure, Laurie, you can agree with me, it's a daily thing, it's a weekly thing, it's a monthly thing. Feedback is a good thing. Feedback is something that you want so you can actually do better at your job. And you take this feedback, if we look at this diagram, and you can change an action or a behavior or any type of output, and that would have a better effect on your job and what you do. And it's just a constant cycle. There are times, we'll get into different types of feedback, but it shouldn't really be taken as a personal attack on you. You should be happy that, somebody's giving me this information, and let me take a minute to just sit back and think, how can I make this a positive outcome for myself? If the feedback seems overly harsh, it's always best to wait until you respond, listen, maybe take a few days to really give yourself time to think. And if you feel like it's overly harsh, then absolutely, you can have a conversation with your supervisor or colleague within the next few days, within the boundaries of respect, obviously, have a more adult conversation about this. So I wanted to draw attention to this feedback staircase. Usually, we want to be on the top 3 steps, but the bottom 3, let's talk about a little bit. There's a bit of denial when we receive feedback. Problem? What problem? There's no problem. I'm doing everything right. Or there are times where we get defensive. Oh, you wouldn't understand. Oh, but we do it like this. Just finding ways to show why it is that you're doing it. It could be an explanation. However, I feel like it's okay to explain why you're doing something, but then to continue the conversation and say, you know what, but I will do it like this going forward. It was my understanding, which is kind of like, I'm sorry, I guess I was doing it this way. These were my reasons, but going forward, absolutely, I'll continue in the way that you mentioned. The best reaction to feedback is understanding. Oh, I see what you're talking about, which is very hard for anybody to do because we never do anything thinking we're doing it wrong. It's just human nature. If we're doing something, usually we think it's right, and that's why we're doing it. But it's always good to take a step back, understand, and then change. So, okay, I'm gonna think about this for a bit, and I think I'm ready to change. So let's do this going forward. So I think the top 3 steps are okay. We just want to step away from being in denial or defending. Just give yourself time to think about it. It does take time and practice for sure. Okay, that's the end of our presentation. Do we have any questions?
I haven't seen any.
Okay, so again, just a reminder, good communication means knowing what to communicate, when to communicate, and how to communicate. And I think I would also put in there listening is a big part of communication that's commonly missed as well.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.